Did you guys face any design challenges in creating satisfying yet brutal executions?
Yeah, so there were a few challenges with the execution points and how brutal can you really be, right? There's also the question of networking and sending all that through. I think the biggest thing for us was the length of an animation. That's something that's super important when you're tackling basically any game. We can call, if we go back to a bunch of old platformers just for a second, we can look at something like Super Mario or Sonic, very responsive platformers. You basically move from one animation to another fairly instantly. It's a matter of 3 frames and you move from one to the other. You don't have to worry about any in-betweens, right? So it's pretty snappy and responsive. And that's kind of what you want from a platformer that relies on timing and things. Then we look on the other side of it and we have something like Prince of Persia, the original Prince of Persia. And this was fully rotoscoped. They had people doing the moves. They recorded it with a camera. He actually recorded his brother doing all the moves, Jordan Mechner, and he then put that into the computer, drew over the top of it, and made sprites. But the result was this really realistic looking platformer that we had never seen before, right? And that gave way to games like Tomb Raider and Uncharted and the more stickier, non-responsive, I guess more streamlined kind of games, right? More cinematic. And so you can go either route. Do you go the more animation heavy character controller where you're waiting a lot of the time and watching the animations and it's more cinematic like an Uncharted? Or are we going for something that has to be quicker, more precise, like a sport, right? And for us, it was pretty clear that we needed to go the faster, more responsive route. Being a tournament structure, really relying on the combat, it wasn't this experience that we were creating that had to be like cinematic, right? And so the more slower animations, I think, just didn't work for what we were trying to do. And so that really leaned into the execution points, right? Because they had to be snappy, they had to be responsive. We couldn't, rip a guy's head off, shove him into, a spike pit, and then, watch him in agony as he slowly dies, because then that's going to take about 5 minutes. And then the other players have probably already done the same to you, right? And so you know much execution. So really the length had to be something we put at the forefront. Things had to be quick and snappy, and therefore the complexity had to be reduced. But then how do we still sell what's happening, right? Throwing someone into flames can be pretty quick, but then now that you're not having to worry about watching an animation anymore, you've already picked them up and thrown them into the point. You can just have them like burning up there and burn to ash. You can have a really quick and still satisfying animation, right? And you see that body kind of burn to ash with the skeleton left over into dust. So something can still have layers of animation, but it can take a few seconds as opposed to, a few minutes. And it's purely throwing them into a spot, watching that actually play out. And if you watch it and there's an enemy next to you, that's something you have to be wary of as well, right? You have to always be worried about your surroundings. You can't really enjoy the execution points. And so for us, we're really looking at it from like an observer's standpoint. When we look at wrestling, a lot of things they call it selling, but basically you take a shot to the head and you're the reactor. You're selling that shot to the head like it really hurt. And that animation, the audience is actually watching while the other wrestler's going to go and do set basically the next spot up in the match, which is like the next sequence of moves, right? And so it's really used to misdirect a lot of the time. And so we're going to lean into a lot of these things. The execution points, they're going to be really quick to engage with, but then the animations afterwards can take a little bit longer to really sell what's happening with the execution points, so that if you're an observer or a player, you're still going to get that satisfaction from the execution point. So we want to make sure it's really targeted to all types of players, not just really the player, right?